On this day in history, we remember the remarkable individuals who shaped our world. Welcome to Who Died Today in History, where we honor their legacies. From artists to leaders, their impact lives on. If you find their stories meaningful, like, subscribe, and hit the bell to stay connected.
Thank you to all our amazing channel members for your generous support.
John Amos, the beloved American actor, passed away on August 21, 2024, at the age of 84 from congestive heart failure. His death was natural, a quiet end to a career that had shaped television and film for over 5 decades. In many ways, the circumstances of his passing reflected both the fragility of life and the dignity he carried throughout his career. Amos came of age as an actor during a time when opportunities for black performers were severely limited, and yet he chose roles that upheld integrity, strength, and resilience. His most iconic performance as James Evans Sr. in Good Times portrayed a working-class father who insisted on responsibility and dignity, mirroring the values of an era grappling with racial inequality and social change. The immediate consequences of his passing were a flood of tributes from fans, colleagues, and cultural commentators who recognized how deeply Amos had influenced television. His death, though expected due to his advanced age and health, left a symbolic void. For many, Amos was not simply an actor, but a representation of fathers, families, and voices that television had often overlooked. The revelation of his passing months after it occurred only amplified the poignancy, as if the world had briefly been living without realizing that one of its cultural anchors had gone silent. His legend was indeed amplified by his departure. Retrospectives of his work in Roots reminded audiences of how groundbreaking the miniseries had been in forcing American households to confront the brutal legacy of slavery. His role in Coming to America highlighted his versatility and ability to balance humor with gravitas. Even his final appearance in Suits LA became a fitting tribute, a reminder that he worked until the end, leaving art as his testament. The story of John Amos's life and death reflects humanity's constant negotiation with mortality, power, and memory. We immortalize figures like him not only through statues or plaques, but by rewatching their performances, quoting their lines, and passing down their influence to new generations. In this way, Amos continues to live, not as a distant historical figure, but as a voice and presence that embodies both the struggles and triumphs of his era. His death reminds us that while mortality is inevitable, memory and art allow certain lives to echo far beyond their earthly limits. William Smith, one of Hollywood's most enduring tough guy actors, passed away at the age of 88. His death was natural, the quiet closing chapter of a life defined by physical strength, resilience, and a remarkable career that spanned over 7 decades. Known for his deep voice, imposing physique, and commanding screen presence, Smith became an emblem of rugged masculinity in American cinema, particularly during the 1960s and 1970s. His passing reflected the natural course of time, reminding audiences that even icons of strength are not immune to life's most universal challenge, mortality. Smith's death occurred in an era when Hollywood had already begun to shift away from the archetypal tough man roles he had embodied. His career had mirrored the values of post-war America, where grit, determination, and stoicism were held in high regard. From biker films like Run, Angel, Run, to his unforgettable turn as Falconetti in the television miniseries Rich Man, Poor Man, Smith represented both rebellion and resilience. His roles often wrestled with themes of power, violence, and survival, qualities deeply tied to the anxieties of the Cold War era and the social turbulence of the 1970s. The immediate response to his passing was a wave of tributes from fans and fellow actors who recognized him as a character actor's character. Though never a leading man in the traditional Hollywood sense, Smith's presence elevated every project he touched. His death did not shift history in the political sense, but it amplified his legend within film culture. Retrospectives of his work reminded audiences of his range, a man who could play both villain and hero with equal conviction, whose on-screen brawls were as memorable as his quieter, dramatic turns. In death, Smith became part of the long lineage of actors immortalized through their art. His passing highlights humanity's tendency to preserve memory through storytelling, film, and commemoration. We immortalize figures like William Smith not with monuments, but through the glow of a television screen or the grain of film stock, mediums that keep his presence alive long after his body has gone. His death reminds us that mortality does not erase impact. Instead, it transforms life into legacy, proving that power and memory endure not in muscle or voice, but in the echoes of art left behind. Anna Kashfi, the enigmatic actress best remembered as the first wife of Marlon Brando, passed away at the age of 80. Her death was the result of natural causes, a quiet ending to a life once marked by public scrutiny, Hollywood allure, and deep personal tragedy. In many ways, Kashfi's death reflected the complexities of mid-20th century celebrity culture, where identity, image, and personal struggles were often magnified by the pressures of fame. Born Joan O'Callaghan in India and raised in Britain, Kashfi entered Hollywood in the 1950s with a carefully curated exotic image at a time when the film industry commodified mystery and foreignness as part of its star-making machinery. Her marriage to Brando in 1957 thrust her into global headlines, intertwining her life story with one of the most celebrated actors of the century. Yet, behind the glamour lay turbulence. Their union dissolved within 2 years, and years of bitter custody battles over their son, Christian Brando, consumed much of her life. The immediate consequence of Kashfi's passing was a reflective re-examination of her life. For decades, she had receded from the public eye, her later years marked by seclusion. Her death did not create cultural shockwaves like that of her more famous contemporaries, but it stirred interest in the forgotten narratives of Hollywood's golden age, the women whose stories were overshadowed by the towering figures they were linked to. In death, Kashfi's legend was amplified not by her filmography, which was brief, but by the mythology surrounding her personal life. She became a symbol of both the fleeting nature of stardom and the toll of fame's harsh spotlight. Her story underscores the values of her era, a time when Hollywood often dictated identity, erasing authenticity in favor of marketable allure, and when women were too often defined in relation to powerful men. Kashfi's passing reminds us of humanity's fragile relationship with memory and fame. While her career was short-lived, she remains immortalized in film, photographs, and the lore of Hollywood history. Through retrospectives and biographies, she is remembered not only for her beauty, but also for the cautionary tale her life represents. In commemorating figures like Anna Kashfi, we reveal our collective desire to preserve even fleeting stardom, proof that every life, whether celebrated or tragic, leaves an imprint on the story of human memory. Barbara Harris, the Tony Award-winning actress and acclaimed star of stage and screen, passed away on August 21, 2018, at the age of 83. Her death from lung cancer marked the quiet end of a career that had once defined the experimental spirit of American theater and the unpredictable possibilities of Hollywood in the 1960s and 1970s. Unlike the tragic, sudden deaths that often catapult performers into legend, Harris's passing was natural, reflective of a life lived on her own terms, intensely creative, yet ultimately private. Harris rose to prominence as a founding member of Chicago's groundbreaking Second City, where improvisation was not just a comedic tool, but a mirror of the social turbulence of the era. Her transition to Broadway brought her a Tony Award for The Apple Tree, while her film career flourished with roles in 1,000 Clowns, Nashville, and the original Freaky Friday. Despite her remarkable talent, she famously resisted the trappings of celebrity, often retreating from Hollywood's spotlight. This decision reflected the growing countercultural critique of fame and materialism that shaped the mid-20th century. The immediate consequence of her death was an outpouring of appreciation from the theater and film communities, many of whom hailed her as a pioneering actress who embodied the possibilities of modern performance. Unlike figures whose deaths altered political or historical trajectories, Harris's passing instead invited reflection on the ephemeral nature of artistry, how brilliance on stage or screen can feel immediate and alive, yet vanish as quickly as it came. In death, her legend was amplified not by notoriety, but by scarcity. Because she had stepped back from acting later in life, her body of work remained finite, frozen in the cultural imagination. This gave her career an almost timeless quality, emblematic of an era when experimentation, satire, and character-driven storytelling defined American entertainment. Harris's story reveals humanity's enduring struggle with memory and legacy. We immortalize such figures through revivals of their plays, rescreenings of their films, and the stories told by fellow artists who were inspired by them. Her passing illustrates that mortality does not diminish creativity, it reframes it. In remembering Barbara Harris, we are reminded that art, even when fleeting, transcends the limits of life, becoming part of the collective memory that keeps human creativity alive across generations. Nancy Dolman, a Canadian actress and singer best remembered for her work in the 1970s and early 1980s, passed away on August 21, 2010, at the age of 58. Her death was the result of complications from ovarian cancer, a natural yet devastating end that underscored the ongoing challenges of women's health in modern society. Unlike the highly publicized tragedies that sometimes surround Hollywood figures, Dolman's death occurred in the quiet privacy of her home in Los Angeles, surrounded by her family. This intimate passing reflected not only her personal values, favoring family and private life over stardom, but also the growing cultural recognition of the dignity of dying within the care of loved ones rather than in the public eye. Dolman's career included a recurring role on the sitcom Soap and appearances in various stage productions, but she chose to step away from acting in the mid-1980s. Instead, she dedicated herself to raising her children with her husband, comedian and actor Martin Short. This decision, while limiting her own fame, highlighted shifting values of the era, particularly the tension between women's professional ambitions and family responsibilities. Her retreat from Hollywood was not a disappearance, but rather a conscious choice to live a life centered on family, a theme that became even more poignant in light of her untimely death. The immediate consequence of Dolman's passing was a wave of sympathy directed toward Martin Short and their children, reminding the entertainment industry of the deeply human experiences behind celebrity lives. While her death did not alter the course of history, it did bring attention to ovarian cancer, a disease that continues to carry a high mortality rate due to late detection. In this way, her passing contributed to broader public conversations about medical research, awareness, and advocacy. Her legacy, though quieter than that of many contemporaries, was amplified by the love and admiration expressed by her family and peers. She became a symbol of a life well lived, not through fame or accolades, but through personal devotion and kindness. Nancy Dolman's death reveals a central truth about humanity's relationship with mortality, that greatness is not always measured by public achievement, but by the depth of personal bonds and the memories we leave behind. We immortalize figures like her less through statues or books, but through the stories retold within families, the private recollections of friends, in the enduring respect for choices made in a life defined by grace, love, and quiet strength. Stefán Karl Stefánsson, the Icelandic actor best known for his portrayal of the bumbling villain Robbie Rotten on the children's television series Lazy Town, died on 2018 at the age of 43. His death was the result of bile duct cancer, a rare and aggressive illness that he had battled publicly for several years. Unlike sudden or scandalous celebrity deaths that often dominate headlines, Stefánsson's passing was marked by courage, openness, and a global outpouring of love, reflecting the values of an era that increasingly embraced transparency about illness and vulnerability. The circumstances of his death revealed the challenges not only of facing a relentless disease, but also of navigating it under public attention. Stefánsson had used his diagnosis as an opportunity to speak about the importance of cherishing life, famously saying, "Life is now. It's not after you've finished school, or after you get the job, or after you've made enough money. Life is now." This perspective resonated deeply in a world often caught up in striving for the future rather than valuing the present moment. His illness and eventual death gave weight to those words, elevating him from a children's entertainer to a figure of profound human wisdom. The immediate consequences of his passing were felt most acutely by fans across generations who had grown up with Lazy Town. Social media exploded with tributes, memes, and musical remixes celebrating Robbie Rotten, transforming what might have been a niche television character into an enduring cultural icon. His death amplified his legend, not by shifting political or historical trajectories, but by uniting global communities in shared humor, nostalgia, and gratitude. He became, in a sense, immortalized through internet culture, a modern form of commemoration that demonstrates how digital communities preserve memory. Stefánsson's death highlights humanity's enduring struggle with mortality while showcasing the power of memory in shaping legacy. He reminds us that even roles intended for children can leave profound marks on collective culture, particularly when paired with personal authenticity and bravery in the face of death. We immortalize him not through statues or textbooks, but through laughter, memes, and musical tributes that circulate endlessly online. His story reveals that in the digital age, memory takes new and creative forms, allowing figures like Stefán Karl Stefánsson to live on in ways that are both timeless and playfully human. Elizabeth Bathory, the Hungarian noblewoman often remembered as the Blood Countess, died on August 21, 1614, under circumstances shaped by both myth and harsh political realities. By the time of her death, she was imprisoned in Kashfi's castle, confined to her chambers after being accused of torturing and murdering hundreds of young women. While her precise guilt remains debated, she spent the final years of her life in isolation, dying of natural causes at age 54. Her confinement and quiet passing reflect the tensions of her era, a time when noble power, gender expectations, and political intrigue often determined how justice was carried out. The accusations against Bathory spoke to fears and values of the early modern period. Tales of her alleged cruelty, bathing in the blood of virgins to preserve youth, may have been exaggerated or politically motivated, yet they captured anxieties about vanity, corruption, and unchecked aristocratic privilege. Her imprisonment rather than execution suggests a compromise. She was powerful enough to avoid the public spectacle of death, but still required punishment to maintain social order. Thus, her death underscored the growing challenge of balancing noble authority with emerging legal and moral constraints. The immediate consequences of her passing were largely local. Her estates and wealth were absorbed into the Habsburg crown's influence, reducing her once powerful family's standing. Yet, in the centuries that followed, her legend far outstripped the political impact of her death. Writers, dramatists, and historians transformed her into one of Europe's most infamous figures, linking her to the Gothic fascination with horror and vampirism. By the 19th century, she was immortalized alongside literary figures like Count Dracula, her image shaped less by fact than by imagination. Her death and subsequent myth-making reveal humanity's tendency to immortalize figures who embody both fascination and fear. Through literature, folklore, and even modern horror films, Elizabeth Bathory has become less a historical noblewoman and more a cultural symbol of cruelty, vanity, and immortality. In remembering her, we see how death does not silence but instead transforms individuals into mirrors of society's deepest anxieties. Her story illustrates that memory, whether grounded in truth or legend, allows humanity to confront its enduring struggles with power, mortality, and the darker corners of human desire.